Hello and welcome to the closing session of Masters and Robots. We're here in the metaverse to talk about the metaverse. You know, what's behind the hype, what actually matters, what the future look like, and how you can get involved. So my name is Catherine Templer-Lewis. I'm a creative scientist and futurist, and I explore in various different manners that intersection of technology and humans and how different realities, be them man-made or very natural around us, interact with our brains and bodies. Now I have here with me in the studio Carl Hayden-Smith. So I'll let you introduce yourself because you'll be much better at it than me. So who are you and what do you do?
So yeah, I'm basically running a research centre in London, and we're very much interested in learning technology. So cognitive science, what can we do with good learning technology? There's so much very poorly designed learning tech. Most of it makes you more stupid, frankly, and I think, yeah, it's a massively interesting area because it combines a lot of different things like psychology, you know, and all sorts of different areas of cognitive science. So the typical technologies I'm looking at are things like mixed reality, sensory augmentation, perceptual adaptation. So what happens when we move into a space where we can become anything, you know, where we can become a different gender or a different age or become a robot? Yeah. You know, what are the implications of you losing your body image or giving over your body image to the metaverse where you can become anything? And obviously it's very attractive to a lot of people, but we're also very interested in evaluating the effects on psychology, on your mental health, on your, you know, your social life. Because we've all seen the power of social media in 2D in a very flat way. What happens when you move that all into a 3D world? It suddenly becomes very real.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting word, real, there, because, you know, the metaverse is something to a lot of people doesn't feel real. For two reasons. One, because it's a technology that seems so far apart from their everyday life. And secondly, because it's not real in the sense we know it. And now if anyone's sort of watching and this is their sort of first sort of step into the metaverse, obviously the word sort of means beyond the universe, but what actually is this word that's being thrown away everywhere? What is the metaverse and how does it impact us?
Well, a simple way of describing it is a move from a 2D internet to a 3D internet. So imagine those 2D web pages that you go to becoming 3D worlds that you start to navigate around like you do the real world. And there are some precedents to the metaverse. If you think about Second Life, you know, massive failure actually. I mean, it still exists, but it tended to replicate the real world a bit too closely. So you would see shopping malls replicated in you know, a 3D environment, and that meant you had to go down the shopping aisles to collect your items, and it's such a massive misuse of the imagination to see that, you know, people are just so dull that they're just replicating something that already is a bit dull
and a bit broken as well. And I think that's the really interesting thing. The internet itself, you know, has accidentally by people not being too considered, replicated a lot of the biases and a lot of the problems of the real world. And we have this opportunity. So I see the metaverse as, you know, I think most people will remember games or have been in games where whether you enter with your laptop or put a headset on, where you can interact with the world, you have a digital body, an avatar that you can move around. And so now we're seeing this extend, you know, you don't just have to play a game, you can create things, you can have a different presence, you can interact. And obviously for businesses, this is a huge sort of opportunity in interacting with consumers.
Yeah.
And, you know, the people who get there first are going to be the people deciding what the future is. And I think before we started this talk, there's this phrase from Buckminster Fuller that really sort of resonated with me, which is, you know, we're called to be architects of the future, not its victims. So from your sort of standpoint, because you see all this technology and you see, you know, what's on the forefront and also what's accessible every day, who's getting it right? Sort of what sort of things are businesses doing in the metaverse that you think is actually quite interesting?
Well, I think the good examples are few and far between at the moment. And if you think about who's powering the metaverse, it's companies like Unreal, and they're providing the building blocks, the platform.
So they're building the content and the actual digital
yeah,
infrastructure.
Yeah, so Unreal, with their Fortnite venture, have kind of kick-started the metaverse in the sense of, you know, a lot of people going into a space and having that interaction that's going to be the sort of template for what's to come. And I think Unreal give away all of their software primarily because they want to be that building block of the metaverse. And I think that there's lots of examples. We're actually working on the X Prize at the moment, where we're looking at rapid upskilling and reskilling of Black, Hispanic, minority groups in America.
Oh.
So we're using the metaverse to actually train up to 5,000 trainees into 3 different careers. And I think that the no-brainer for the metaverse is training, because if you're trying to train as a mechanic or a machinist in a 2D environment, you're using manuals, then you're having to translate that 2D world into a 3D world. Whereas if you're in 3D all the way through your training, so you're training with maybe the replicas of the machines that you're going to be using, which is what we're doing with X Prize. So we're building simulations, and we're enabling people to practice over and over again, many, many times, to actually be, getting it right before they maybe go into the real world and actually practice. So a lot of people post-pandemic are very much still not wanting to go out into the world too rapidly, or it's a very different scenario now. People are very much more cautious. So the metaverse has really grown during the pandemic because of that fact that people are potentially wanting a hybrid world now, where they can practice, they can socialize in these spaces. But what I want to see is making sure that people are not going into a Ready Player One solution where we forego the real world, and therefore the world is actually dismantled and destroyed because everyone's now moved into the digital, thinking that it's a better alternative, whereas actually we really want to bring the analog back in and have this hybrid approach.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting. My background is actually human sciences, and I am amazed and awed at how good humans are at being in the real world. We are adapted to that. We're not yet adapted necessarily to digital worlds. And for people who they might have heard of probably the biggest activation of Fortnite, which was a gaming world that you could enter, was the musical artist Marshmello did a big gig that millions of people could access. Now that's an amazing sort of event that can happen. Then around that you get this infrastructure, because of course if it's a digital world and there's lots of different metaverses, there's lots of different digital worlds, imagine lots of different games and bubbles you can enter, they start to have their own currency. So that of course is cryptocurrency, which people have heard about, and NFTs and things like that. So you get this whole world, and for me it's really interesting that this world is being built, but exactly that, what happens if we start to forget reality, and we are very avoidant as a species, and we are facing a lot of huge challenges. And so, there is this danger, like you say, that we step into this digital reality and we forget the real world. How much do you think then that there'll be this hybrid, and how do we make the hybrid work for us? Have you seen people, of course there's AR, augmented reality, as well as VR. Do you think that's the next step, and how could businesses buy into that?
Well, I think if you look at groups like Marshmallow Laser Feast and the project they did, Tree Hugger, so very interesting entertainment piece, but it's very much the beginning of their journey. Whereas, just to explain what goes on in that experience, so they went to capture a redwood tree, a ginormous tree in Yosemite Park, with LiDAR scanners. So they're actually capturing the real world, creating a digital twin. So digital twins are very much a key notion in the metaverse. So
that's just a replica of something in real life that's been rendered digitally.
Yeah, and then what they've done in the VR experience, so you entered a warehouse and you had this like foam structure in the middle of the room, and you're like, what's that? And you put on your VR glasses and suddenly you're seeing this ginormous tree at scale. But what's super interesting about their work is that you're experiencing the tree from the perspective of the water. So you're going through the root systems, and it's all properly, it's not a render, it's actually a real copy of the real world. And then suddenly you're experiencing, and you can put your head inside the tree and experience the tree in ways that you'd never be able to experience it in the real world. and then suddenly, you're going off the ground as the water goes up the trunk of this tree. So you're having an out-of-body experience through technology and through the replication of the world. So what they're trying to do now is go a step further and actually protect the old growth forests using these technologies. So actually creating a LiDAR scan of a big chunk of the Amazon, and then trying to work out what's a good mechanism from a business perspective to actually protect that forest from being cut down. And maybe that's where the NFT comes in, because the NFTs are, massive, just to explain what NFTs are, non-fungible tokens. So it's a way of actually putting a marker on the blockchain to say this is a unique object, or this is a patent, effectively a patent, saying that this is the first time it's been done, and I'm marking it into the blockchain so it can't be interfered with. But how do we create NFTs that don't destroy? Because there's a huge environmental cost for minting NFTs at the moment, because they're mainly minted on Ethereum, and actually that is environmentally, one NFT minting reportedly about 2 weeks electricity of a Westerner. So how do we actually reverse that trend and actually start to create a green revolution from these new projects that are actually trying to protect something like nature through this digital innovation? So I think business can be, there's a lot of talk about carbon offsetting, but there's a lot of greenwashing, which means that a lot of the stuff doesn't actually end up having a real impact. So how can we use these new technologies like crypto, like the NFT, like the metaverse, to actually really change society and build a better world?
Well, actually, that's a really interesting point. There's like two things I want to pick up in there. And the first is the way that really sort of savvy creatives and businesses are using the metaverse for things that you can't do in real life. Whether that's give you a perspective of the world you can't get, like Marshmallow Laser Feast in the tree, or whether that's hosting events for hundreds of thousands of people that you wouldn't literally be able to do, especially in the lockdown. And the other thing that I was really interested in is you mentioned the sort of buzzword of the moment, NFTs.
Yeah.
Because as well as having its own currency and, it's going to have a huge economy, the metaverse, it has NFTs, which, we think of as art pieces that, have a value, a digital value in the digital world. So who's exploring this, do you think?
Well, there's currently, I would point to a couple of NFT projects, one being CryptoPunks, which a few people know about. It's a
great name.
Great name. But yeah, I think the one that I'm most interested in is the Damien Hirst project, the currency. And what Damien's done is actually take 10,000 original artworks and turn them into NFTs. So if you were lucky enough to get one, you basically have to now choose whether you want the original Damien Hirst piece of physical art or whether you choose the NFT. Wow. And everyone initially, including Damien himself, was like, no, I'm going to go full physical. Yeah. And it's now everyone's sort of, because not many people get their heads around, why would I, as an art collector, want to own a JPEG, which everyone else can download, but I own the original reference to that JPEG. So all you really own is just the pointer.
The pointer, yeah.
So if the artwork disappears from the server, you own a pointer to nothing.
Yeah.
So not many people are getting their heads around it. And I don't think maybe that's the best way of using an NFT. But if you're actually now seeing what Damien's doing, it's a very clever move. It's not new, because Marcel Duchamp did something similar in the 30s. But Damien is now sort of saying, because prices have gone through the roof. So I think there was one sold for $150,000 just the other day. It's only been 2 months in existence, and there were $2,000 to begin with. So now everyone's going, well, if they're going to go to $500,000, why would I ever keep because it's a very quite small piece of art, like it's an A4 piece of paper with dots on it, made by his assistants. Yeah. So it's now everyone's starting to question, well, maybe there is value in this NFT. Obviously, if it's life changing, if you can cash out and all you've done is buy a piece of art from a person, and then you've got rich. Yeah. You don't need to work anymore, or whatever it is. And there's another example where you've got a rapper in America who's released 1 million NFTs for one album. So it's 1 million streams of the album. And what's super interesting about that is that he's going on about let's get the money together, let's get rich together. And it's a bit crazy because it's like you're buying an album, and like he released 3 unreleased tracks as NFTs before. They were $1 each. The following week they were $700, and then they went to $34,000.
That's insane.
So you're buying a product, and then you're getting rich from the product.
Yeah.
So
and yet it still just exists in a digital format.
Yeah.
And I suppose it is, you're buying the fact that you were the first person to say, that's mine, and that goes down in the blockchain, so that it's recorded. And it throws into sort of interesting questions on what has value. Do physical objects have value? Do material, objects have value? Or is it more about, things and experiences? And I think that's a really interesting place for businesses to start considering what are future consumers going to value. Are they going to be, we know they love experiences, so where is meaning made and where is value made? And the economy of the metaverse is taking over. So we have these worlds which, as we discussed, you can play around with and create content that you couldn't do in real life, whether that's flying or changing the laws of physics. They're building worlds that you can inhabit and do more than play games. You can host events, you can create digital artwork that you can own. I know people who are actually buying property in one of the metaverse worlds, Decentraland, and they can do anything on that. Sotheby's has just bought an art gallery to have an art gallery and auction house on it. And then of course you've got all the training you can do in the metaverse. And do you think, something that you've said before, there is this shift from sort of content to context. And I always really pick up when you say that in your writing and speaking. And what do you mean by that, and how does it relate to the metaverse?
Yeah, well, in simple terms, content engineering is what we've been doing when we think about making a piece of music, making a piece of art, or doing any sort of physical activity, or producing some sort of form of artwork. Whereas context engineering is this idea where we will change the way we perceive as the new content. So therefore all the existing content changes ad infinitum, because the way you see may change, or the way you hear may change. So for instance, I've worn a 360 goggles, so it's given me 360 vision, which is super easy. It's just a street view camera input, and instead of seeing 180 degrees, I'm squashing 360 degrees into my 180 degree view. My brain accepts it as a new reality, and it's almost as if the brain goes, oh, it's nice, why didn't you do this before,
Yeah.
And it only takes about 15 minutes to adjust. I've worn it for a whole week.
Amazing.
So it's like, what does that mean if we can change the way we perceive as the new economy? And you talk about experiences, it's like, it won't be enough to go to see a film anymore. We want to be in the film. And we want to be, and that again is your consciousness is wherever your eyes are, wherever you place your eyes. So if you can place your eyes within the film, and I think it's all about, we're all thirsty for the third dimension, the fourth dimension, the fifth. How do we expand beyond what we've been doing? And there's a massive resources problem. So, maybe we've made a lot of content, but how do we start making context? And I think that's where the metaverse fits in, because like I said before, you can change the way you look, or you can change your gender, and a lot of people are very ready and desire that shift to context.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting, for businesses who are so used, I think, to sort of, profiling consumers and profiling clients in the real world, that gets thrown into disarray in the metaverse, for good and bad. I think it's, for a lot of people I know, it's incredibly freeing to be freed from a, perhaps a gender label or a physical, image. They can change that as well. But like we mentioned at the beginning, there is a sort of danger, of course. Are we going to see, this sort of, what is beauty going to be in the metaverse? What is digital presence going to be? It's a slightly lawless place, and if I attack you in the real world, we know I've attacked you, but what happens in the metaverse if I haven't physically hurt you? What do you think the big watch outs are at the moment for sort of creating in the metaverse?
I think it goes down to mixed reality at the forefront. Like, augmented reality has been around a very long time. It's suddenly becoming available via things like the Microsoft HoloLens. But to explain, when you put on the HoloLens, you're creating a 3D model of everything you see. So the way augmented reality works is that they have to have something to track what they're going to put, where you're going to put your digital overlay. So you have to create a 3D model underlaying that. But that means if I'm sitting here looking at you, I'm creating a 3D model of you.
Yeah.
Right? So who owns that?
Who owns that?
And if it's on Microsoft servers, it's not you that owns it. Yeah. So one of the big things that I'm working on with Cryotech is actually end-to-end encryption. So I'm making sure that you potentially make an NFT of yourself.
Yeah.
So you mint yourself as your own avatar, and then you own yourself. And if anyone wants to use your image, they pay you. You pay you a royalty. Yeah. And I think that's the power of the blockchain. But again, the law is very fuzzy around these things because they're just rapidly emerging. But I think one of the problems is deep fakes. You know, if I have your 3D representation, I can do what I want with it. And that's going to be a big area for the future.
Yeah, I think sort of, you know, we all know about cybersecurity, but I think it goes beyond just the sort of basic sort of data protection to image protection to, you know, and one of the best things about the metaverse is it has the potential for us all to be creators. You know, anybody can go and buy land, create things in it. You know, and like you said, it's very fuzzy around legislation. Of course, the danger is the big corporations are going to come in. Now, there's people like sort of Jamie Burke from Outliers, who's got the Crucible, which is sort of trying to democratize, you know, having your own image, having your own avatar, being able to build, you know. And at the moment, people don't know there's still a lot of differences between the different worlds being created in metaverses, and you can't necessarily just take your avatar from one into another. Who are the sort of the big players who are trying to sort of own this space, do you think?
Just one example, Facebook. Facebook's Horizon, you know, you can see Zuckerberg's plan very early on with Oculus to build their own metaverse. And I think we all know what Facebook owns in terms of your 2D world. So when you're using Facebook in the 2D realm, you could argue that Facebook know you better than your mum knows you, just from that 2D data. But if you're moving into 3D and using Oculus a lot, you know, within 5 minutes of wearing the Oculus, your movement, your body signature, your gait, the way you move, will mean that any CCTV camera can recognize you within 5 minutes of basically being in a VR environment owned by Facebook. So I guess you know, once they know you in 3D, they'll know you better than you know yourself and be able to predict what you're going to do next. And I think that's super scary, and also, you know, people are just giving it all up because they want the Oculus Quest. You know, they want an untethered VR experience. You don't even own the Oculus Quest piece of hardware. You may think you own it, but actually, just like a Facebook account, you're getting it for free because of what they're getting back from you. And I think, you know, unless you continue to have a Facebook account, you won't be able to access that hardware. So it's super interesting, and I think that Facebook workrooms, again, looking at training in the metaverse, you know, they're certainly cornering a part of that metaverse, but it's very much not an open metaverse. And I think that's where the dangers come. And unfortunately, it's a race. You know, it's a race to who gets there first. And because the Quest is the most popular VR headset, it's actually put VR back on the map. Then, you know, you could argue that they're ahead.
That's a really good point, actually, Carl, and something we talked about sort of at the very beginning, that idea of the dangers, the what's out, you know, that this terrifying but very real idea that someone like Facebook, who already knows a lot about you, can know you better than you know yourself. And, you know, I think for me what's interesting is we're very aware now of what's happened historically in terms of using people as commodities. And we have this whole other domain, the metaverse, this digital world, where actually, you know, it's not going to be about your skin color or your gender, but there is this danger or opportunity for people to use it badly, to use identities, other people's identities, as commodities, you know, and we have to be careful about that. We have to learn and educate ourselves. You know, there's a responsibility of ourselves and each other to be careful about that. I mean, I think we talked about it at a different point, that idea in New York. What was it that happened there? There was a policy over COVID, because of course COVID has actually accelerated a lot of our joining the digital community. You know, for a lot of people, there was an acceleration of digital technology. Suddenly, whether it was joining the internet, the VR world, you know, Zoom calls, people were becoming more digital. Yeah. And what happened in New York?
So Naomi Klein exposed plans of what is being referred to as the new screen deal. And if you think about mixed reality, as I mentioned, you're creating a 3D model of everything, but also you're only interacting with the air. And obviously not interacting with a surface or with another person has a lot of benefits in a pandemic, but then we're encouraging that long term. For me, there's something called skin hunger, where we are social beings and we need physical contact, and to suddenly create a world where physical contact is no longer required or necessary is a bit of an issue. And I think we need to think about our technologies not only from a cognitive sense, but also a biological sense. What are they doing to us as human beings?
We evolved to be social, and one thing, the isolation of the pandemic was really bad, not just for our mental health, but our physical health. We produce all these chemicals like oxytocin by being in physical space with people. Now it'll be interesting to see how our brains adapt. I know some of your research to these more metaverse digital spaces, but at the moment, we can't forget the physical realm. But for brands and businesses, it's not all doom and gloom. There's huge opportunity, and I think for me it's always been about the intention of, is this technology human first? Are we using it in a human first way? And we've talked about training, and we've talked about putting on events in the metaverse. For businesses, what would you really tell them to do at this point in terms of, it can seem very daunting, this idea, this hyped up metaverse.
I think from a business perspective, look at what you're offering at the moment and think about, what does it mean if you're moving that offer into a 3D realm? Will it be enhanced if you're in a 3D world? What are the crossovers? Because if you're thinking about your business as a digital twin, then what benefit is there? I think with a lot of these hyped up sort of scenarios, it's a case of like taking a step back and really thinking, does the digital really bring additional meaning and value to my business, or is it just a gimmick? And I think I always advise people to not go down a digital route, even just a standard digital route, if it's not really doing something that you can't do in the analog world. And I think a lot of people are very much just trying to create a solution, a technological solution for something that we don't really need in a lot of contexts. So think very carefully about your business. I know I work with a lot of training sort of scenarios. So like if you're training a mechanic, then obviously training them in 3D where a lot of people are dyslexic, or a lot of people don't have the cognitive sort of attention span to actually read a manual, but they can learn intuitively in 3D, potentially with the expert there, an expert avatar. It's a question of what is this scenario that's the best for me, and also I think I heard this phrase the other day. Mixed reality only really makes sense if you apply machine learning, or if you apply artificial intelligence. So I think it's a question of looking at these things as tools, understanding that they are just tools unless you have a really good sort of frameworks for use around them.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. And these frameworks for use, we're sort of, I think a lot of people just expecting to be told them or for them to be there, and they're not. And I think this is an opportunity and a call out, really, this point in time, for brands to be authentic, to think what is the digital future we want to build, and to be architects of that, because there is a lot of hype, and it will be a big, gold mining bubble that will burst. And I think the brands that have had integrity and thought about things like sustainability, the green revolution, or thought about protecting people's identity, or what can they bring to people, whether be that, employees or consumers or themselves, they will be the long-term winners. And I think there's a huge opportunity there as well. I mean, in terms of sort of, because we're running to time soon, but what do you sort of see, next in terms of, your work? Where are you like wanting to tend? Because you've seen all the technologies come and go, and at Ravensbourne, head of learning and research, what's actually sort of a glimpse of the far future that we can get excited about?
I think for me it's about the true hybrid reality, the mixed reality, where we take the best affordances of the analog, which we've long forgotten or we are forgetting. You're writing with your hand, you're making notes in the physical world, and for me there's a lot of benefits to handwriting, And a lot of people don't do any handwriting anymore. The benefits are that you're actually augmenting your memory. You're actually much more likely to action what you're writing, you know. And I think that it's all about bringing back the analog, but with the best of the digital as well. And I think all of my projects are very much focused on how do we get back to being, you know, because we're all living in our heads and we're all very much, you know, disconnected from nature. So I think the mixed reality environment, the augmented reality, where you're no longer stuck to a chair, you're no longer stuck to a screen, where you're carrying everything in your eyes, you know, where you're seeing. So you're back in the world, you know, and maybe, you know, Pokemon Go was a great example where everyone's chasing monsters around, but maybe if you use the same technology to get people to vote, get people to recycle, get people back in the world. And I think there's a thirst for it, but people want to have really good applications.
Yeah, and I think, and I do love that, and I think it's this idea, you know, let's not use it to escape, let's use it to be better humans in the real world. And we saw that with the technology from sort of AI, and there was that fear of singularity and robots would take over. But actually, you know, the best AI, it augments you. It's a partnership with you being human to allow you to do the human things really, really well. And, you know, the things that really inspire me are sort of digital experiences that reconnect you with nature and the huge well-being sort of benefits for that, not only to us, but to how we then go out and have more stewardship of the world. But, you know, it's funny because we're doing this today in the metaverse, and there's a real reason for it. Because of the pandemic, we can't physically travel to the conference to be with everybody, you know, and so this is a wonderful way of connecting with people. So what is this setup before we close here, for the people who are wondering what we're actually doing? Yeah,
so we're in our holoportal at Ravensbourne, and it's a volumetric capture studio. So we've been running this for about 6 years. With help from Double Me initially. So we incubated Double Me, Albert Kim's company, and that then transformed and evolved, and we had Play Labs. And so basically now what we're doing with this kind of studio is actually looking at what is valuable in volumetric sense. And you know, we're just doing an interview to show we're inside the metaverse. But volumetric capture basically means that you're creating a point cloud of us at the moment. But it could be of anything, it could be of any performance. And you know, I think the key thing is that with a video, it's a fixed view. It's the director's view. So it's prescribed. With volumetric capture, it's declarative, which basically means you, as the viewer, can place your camera, place the point of view that you want to see the scene from wherever you want. So if you know, if you're trying to train, and you're looking, you want to see the expert's hands, you can go right to the hands and just look at the hands. So it's like you create the map rather than the point of view. And I think the move to field of view is exactly what volumetric creates. And I think that's why it's such a powerful media.
And that's amazing. You know, to me, that is an amazing use case, and it is the future. And so I suppose, you know, because this is the end of the conference, and I hope everyone's had an amazing, sort of mind-blowing, inspirational conference, you know, what is the next step that everyone can do to sort of, you know, to go out into the metaverse?
Educate yourselves. You know, get to, you know, don't give up your sovereignty. Basically, don't let Facebook rule your world.
And I guess that's sort of the quote we started with by Mr. Fuller, you know, be the architect of the future, not the victim. And so with that, I mean, it's always an absolute pleasure to chat to you, Carl. Carl Hayden-Smith from Ravensbourne. I'm Catherine Temple-Lewis. It's been an incredible conference. Thank you to Master Robot for having us, and everyone have a wonderful time in the real world and the metaverse.
Thanks, Catherine. Thanks, everyone.